Okay, so I just want to show you with the interior that I've got here, the lighting can be an issue if you need to place lights in your ceiling. It's good to do that in your ceiling plans, of course. I'm going to open up my ground floor ceiling plan, and you can see I've got a series of lights I've already placed into this ceiling. And so if you don't see either your lights or the ceiling, the first thing to check is your view range in that ceiling plan view. I'm going to go to edit there and show you that I've got the top set to 200mm above the level above my current view. And so that's an important point. The current view is ground floor, and so the cut plane is going through 2.3 metres above ground floor. I might bring that down to let's say 1800, and I'll hit apply, and now you can see my openings that weren't there before because my cut plane was too high. And then the top is level 1, which is of course the level above ground floor, and then I've just brought it up 200 above that for both the top and the view depth, so that it'll pick up anything that's on level 1, and so that way it'll get my floor. And I do want to see that if the ceiling isn't blocking it. So the floor edge I've got is along here, and so if my ceiling isn't there, I can see the floor and anything that's above slightly. So that's a handy thing, to bring your top a little bit above the level above. And so that's usually the reason you won't be able to see things like a ceiling or a floor that you know are above the level you're working on. And it's good to look in your section views as well, so I'll look in the section and just show you. I've got there, you can see ground floor was the ceiling plan I was in, so the ceiling plan was looking from the cut plane, which is at about this height here, also a bit lower because I brought it down, and then looking up towards the ceiling that I've got here, and then up to 200mm above that level 1. And so back to ground floor ceiling plan. Now I'm going to try and place some lights. So with component, I'll go to load family just to show you where I've got some extra lights that I've made in the one on the P drive. Design, Revit library, and then in lighting fixtures, you'll see I've got a light, downlight recessed can glow. Okay, so it's basically the original recessed can, but I've changed it so that it glows. So in other words, when you're looking at the light source itself, you'll see some light coming out of that the fixture that you don't get with the original one. Okay, so I'll open that, and you'll notice that it isn't choosing it for me in properties because I've loaded this light previously. And so that's a common issue you'll get with families in Revit, and you need to just remember that if you don't see it come up in your type, select it in properties, have a look for it in the list, and you will find it. It's back up towards the top. So there it is, downlight recessed can glow is there, and I'll just choose one of the different sizes. These are not that different apart from the size. Okay, so you can see then it's coming up with an error symbol, but it is at least showing me the light. So I'm going to try to place that, and you can see it's going in, so it's working. Don't worry. Oh no, it looks like it's sorry, it's just unfortunate. It looks like the error, but it is working. So I'm just going to put some lights that should be visible now in my perspective view. So get a few in there, and one just past the stairs maybe. Now if you want to line your lights up, a line works really well. So with the align tool, you can pick the alignment edges inside your light, so you'll get these crossed lines that you can use to line things up. So I'll tick multiple alignment, and then pick that essentially centre line, and then go along and pick these others. They're fairly well lined up anyway, but this will just ensure they are. And then I could line things up going the other way too, so the same approach. To reset the alignment edge, I'm going to click into an empty spot, and now I can pick a new edge to line up with, and then go along and pick okay, so that's a good way of lining lights up, so I know it can be a bit tricky otherwise. And then in my perspective, 3D View 13 was the one I was working in. Now I can see those new lights. I already had a few over here anyway. And so maybe I'll give my view a better name. Maybe exception. That'll do. I've already got that. So stairs. Okay, so now I'm just going to go to try and render this to see those lights in action. And so I'm going to change it to interior artificial only, and then try to render this. So it should render pretty quickly. I've only got 19 lights, and it's good to try to do some test renders before you have a lot of lights in your scene, because even if you don't have very complex geometry, the number of lights makes a big difference to the render time. Okay, so hopefully you can tell from that it's getting the light from here and here, but those new lights I've placed aren't doing very much. Okay, it might not be obvious, but trust me, they're not really doing a lot. So I'm going to close this and show you why. It's because if you have a look in section, let's go to a different section. Sorry, I did have one made. There's so many here. There we are, it's this one. Okay, so then if you look at it in wireframe, you'll see the lights are sitting in the ceiling, but the floor that I've made covers up those lights. Basically, it's overlapping or intersecting with those lights, and so the light source won't come through. The little bit of light you might have seen on the floor was actually from the material. So I'm going to select that floor, edit type, and then make it not so thick. So there, that's the problem. I'll make that just 200 mil. So now altogether my floor is only 240, roughly. But then if you do want to bring the ceiling up so that you don't have a gap, just add that thickness to your ceiling instead. So it's 300 and something. I'll just maybe increase the ceiling a bit. So I'll maybe not do all of that with the ceiling. I'll just make it, say, 200. So that's now big enough to encompass the lights. And if you do want to fill that gap in, you can always then add that to your floor. So back to the floor, and 147, so 347. Right, so you'll have two objects like this, but you can then use join those two things, and that will make them read as one anyway. And then a final little trick to get those lines to be the same line weight. If you go into manage, and then in your, sorry, not in additional settings, just in your object styles, which is this button here, you'll find ceilings is set to 3, while floors, sorry, right there, floors are set to 4 when they're cut. So that's why the floors are heavier. Now I think the floors are too heavy. You could bring the ceilings up to 4. Okay, so you could change that to 4, but I'm going to change the ceiling, the floors instead to 3. And there we are. So now it's got the same line weight and it makes it much neater. Back to hidden line, and that's fairly clean. And so now in my perspective as well, save that file. I'm going to render just to see the difference. Unfortunately, it's not an obvious difference, but you'll find in most cases it will make a greater effect. And then using exposure, you can increase the brightness for an interior render. So that's about as far as we can go. We've got some artifacts and things like that coming through. That's from the massing. So I've just hidden the massing using the toggle on the massing and site tab. Render again. Okay, so much cleaner now. And then finally going back to exposure, you can see it's very warm, so you can do things like adjust the white point to make that cooler, which will be obviously a better thing. So now I can safely add more lights and know that they will be clear of the ceiling. And back in the plan, unfortunately you can't copy lights because they're hosted. Again, it's just a bit of a Revit thing. So if I try to copy those lights, you'll see it'll give me an error. So I'll cancel that. Right, so you have to just place them manually, which is, I know, not the best, but it does work. Okay, so let's get a few more lights in there, and don't be afraid to put quite a few lights, but also don't go overboard. So you need enough light to give you your basic level of illumination. Okay, so there, rendering again. But if you put too many, if you have, you're getting into the hundreds of lights, the render times will go through the roof, and it just becomes much harder to control the light as well. So that's a bit more even. And so then also when you take it into 3ds Max, I'll save that one, you can do a lot more if you need to increase the amount of light in different areas without adding extra lights. So think about the options you have later when you use programs like Max. It'll give you a lot more control. And so as long as the lights are working in a basic way like that, then that's good enough, really. Probably should point out maybe some of the other light types as well, but I'll do some of that later. Pendant lights and lights that aren't recessed can be worth thinking about because they'll light the underside of your ceilings and other things. But anyhow, I'll just let this one finish. It shouldn't take too long, and I'll leave it at that. So it's a bit frustrating. This first part, that's doing the primal gather. So this is indirect lighting. In other words, bouncing light from one surface to another. It just takes a minute to calculate it. and then the render itself is much quicker. So once it gets past 50%, there we go. So you can see there, this is just improving the quality, which controls things like anti-aliasing and the quality of the bounce lighting. Exposure you can adjust in post, so I can always go to adjust the exposure and play with still things like the colour and the overall exposure value. And then the other thing that affects quality, other than this preset quality setting, is your resolution. And you can see it's still fairly low res, but for test renders that's fine. Later, just make sure you know you can go to printer and get much higher resolutions that way. But I won't render it like that, that'll take too long, so I'll just leave it at that for now.